Yeah.
So. Nathan's bringing the trees.
Yeah, it is.
Sorry that I have big dreams.
So did they spend
It's 4 o'clock, time to start our meeting. First order, with the order, first thing we'll do is pledge allegiance, all stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Item number 3, establish a quorum. We have a quorum. We're absent. Kathy Gray is absent at this time. Number 4, financial update. And Crystal Hilton, she will give us the financial update.
Actually, Jim wants to do it.
Jim?
LeaAnne, can we get that PowerPoint up there?
Before we start, trying to hold this up as close as I can. I've had different residents tell me that at times when I talk, I don't have it close enough to where they can hear you on the Zoom. So I'd like to remind everybody, if it's your turn to do some talking, turn it on, put it up close to your mic so the residents that are watching on Zoom can hear it. Jim?
Okay. So when I started reviewing some of the packet again this morning, I realized I had to do the treasurer's report today. So I got a quick meeting with Crystal, and so bear with me a little bit. I think we've got it here. I'm not knowing that Crystal. In general, bottom lines, you see some red up there. And a lot of that has to do, you'll see when we go through on the expenses and the revenues, that a lot of it has to do with the weather that was in February and how it affected green fees and the lodge and everything. But I think really, if you look at the net revenue, we have a loss of $7,700 approximately there. So, you know, overall for what happened in the month of February, I think we probably came out pretty good. So next slide. So here are the revenues actuals budget, and so we're about $18,700 kind of below budget on the revenues. And again, you can see newsletter ads were good, and building permits, we did have one new construction there. And the green fees, as you can imagine, were down. And then late fees, related, again, kind of related to weather and mail service. Crystal and I were talking this morning, and there's a lot of hardship going on there with some of that. So Crystal's looking at kind of giving people some latitude in those so that we acknowledge some of the hardships coming from that, which I think is probably a pretty good gesture. Miscellaneous income. Campground fees down a little bit, quarterly cable franchise refund. That's more of a timing issue. So. And the food and beverage sales, as you can imagine, the revenues were down, and when we get to expense, you can see where we decreased the expense side of things too. Any questions on that slide? So on the expense side, we're, as you can see, we're much better on lodging management. And we did not have the income expense report in the package. You got it here at the meeting, so I probably have that chance to look very close at it. But Crystal did combine two line items in there for lodging management and the food service in there on the expense side of things. But as you can see, we're 22,000 are good on that, so that kind of helps offset some of the loss of revenues. Securities, $10,000 to the good on the budget, mostly due to the head count that's associated with salaries and benefits. There was a vehicle repair, and again, there's a timing issue with the insurance check that resulted from an accident there. So that will kind of work out too. The public works, Chris is nearly, I guess, at full staff, thankfully, and but we do have a little bit of savings there due to salaries. The sanitation and recycling, there was no roll-off expense for the month. It may show up a little bit later in another month or two. We'll see here on that. then golf course, there's some overages, again, primarily due to the water and the timing that continue to pump water here, and we're having to pay for that. In administration, the North Star software and the general insurance, both of those two items, when you look at those line items, if you remember, we did adjust for that, but that is not being reflected here. So that 33,000 will be different once the budget adjustment is applied to it. So from a summary on the reserve funds, we're up a little bit on the ARF balance. ARF balance is continuing to accrue some money also. And same thing in the Lake Management Reserve Fund. So we're in good standing on all of those reserve funds. The delinquent accounts, you did have in your packet a historically look at some of that. So if you look at the totals on that, we are up significantly. There's about 80 delinquent accounts that are being showed there overall. And we've had close to that. If you look historically, I think there was 76, 78. But again, Crystal, correct me if I'm wrong, we do have received some payments, which will reduce that total. It just wasn't, they just weren't received in time for we did the report. So those numbers will be a little lower, but we are probably up a little bit on some of the delinquent accounts. Also, I think Clark noted this in the last meeting, in that 90-day delinquent, there's one account that we're trying to deal with the courts and some issues, and the court hasn't been open for business. There's about $10,000 of that $26,740 in 90 days, which hopefully will be resolved when that happens. And then the Indian Creek, we're almost 200 total members that we're collecting the money for. Again, remember that many members give by separate check or in other ways, and so that's just what we've collected for almost 200 members. And then overall, the cash balances are in good shape. But again, we were kind of talking a little bit about that 440,000 that's in the checking. It continues to be a little bit high, and maybe we can work with the investment committee when we get going with that to lower that a little bit, earn some money on that. And same thing with reserve funds. Our balance there is $2.718 million, and we might be able to do some investments on those to earn a little bit more with that. So the total balance of all accounts is $3,159,768. So we're in good shape. And I saw an email earlier about payroll protection program loan, I think it was. And we're continuing to wait and see what happens with that. But we anticipate forgiveness on the loan that is outstanding on that right now. But Crystal, anything that you'd like to add or correct me on? All right, thank you.
Does anyone have any questions concerning the treasury report? Yep.
Maybe just a question for Brian and Crystal. On those delinquents, is there a process that you have where once they become so many days delinquent, you notify, and then after so many more days? Okay.
Very black and white. What would you like to clarify?
Yes, after 90 days, we actually put a lien on the property with the county, and actually LeaAnne actually sent out the late notices today. And after you get to 69 days, you're getting certified notes and letters so that you are aware that you are extremely late.
Anyone else have a question on the treasury report? If not, we'll go to item 5, COVID-19 committee.
Just a moment, if we could just touch back on the PPP update. I've invited Brittany who is the branch manager and loan officer with First State Bank to the beginning part of our meeting today, and I'd like for her to give the board of directors an update on the exact status. Rick Walker and I met with the CEO of First State Bank and their credit officer a week, 10 days ago, and generally it was a good report. However, there's a couple of timing issues that you need to hear from our banker that will require some administrative steps. No decision, no, yes, we're gonna do it, no, but you need to understand that there's a timing issue. All right, thank you, Brittany.
Hello. So I did check, on round one's forgiveness, and as of today, at this moment, it's still pending SBA. Round two, we are processing those right now. The deadline as of today, which SBA could change it, is March 31st to be approved. So if we're gonna process those, we really need to get applications in this week. So if you're interested, you just have to show a 25% reduction, in any quarter from 19 compared to 20. Any questions?
And that would apply for quarter two in the comparison, and that's the one quarter where we do clearly qualify for that, the current criteria. The point is, the board doesn't have to take action on accepting it, but it would be my recommendation that we go ahead, tell Crystal, hit the button to at least set it up. The bankers also indicated that they think they'll get an extension past March 31st. They'll kick it another 90 days, so we won't be rushed. I don't want to come back to the board April 5th, hey guys, we missed our opportunity, just because we didn't have our eye on the ball.
So which time frame was that, Brian, then, did you say second?
Second quarter of 2019 comparison to 2020.
Jim,
We already received PPP for that second quarter though, didn't we? Isn't that round one that we got in the first?
So round two, you just have to show a reduction in income in 2020 comparing it to 19, and they issued more funds, so that you could qualify for more funds.
So we can, for the same quarter we already applied for out of round one, we kind of
You
get
can-
more money out for round two.
Yes.
Thank you for that one, I guess. So, okay,
That's why I brought her in, because I couldn't.
I would think if we can show favorable reason why we qualify, we should do it for the same reason we did it before. To help our members have a lot of money to work with, and we make them up short there.
I just want to make sure we don't lose that opportunity, and it'll be up to the board to give the overthought, what's the right governance to do? Because my understanding is the board really went through it and said, you could get a lot more. And you guys skinnied it down to just your hardcore needs. And as you know, there's other organizations out there that chose to operate differently, go for the trough. So anyway, that's not for today, but I just want to let you know that that would be my recommendation, that we give instructions to Crystal tomorrow morning. Let's get the process moving.
yeah, we would have to determine exactly the amount of money that we're wanting to do on the second. Is that,
There's all sorts of, yeah.
okay. This will be something that we will discuss later in another meeting. Okay.
Agenda.
All right, we'll have it on the agenda for the next meeting. Anyone have questions, on PPP? No. Okay. Number 5, COVID-19 committee, Kathy Gray, as I mentioned, Kathy, had surgery this morning, and so she's not here, so I don't know, Brian, did anyone have anything for COVID-19?
No, just that since the relaxing of the face mask and some of the distancing, businesses and lodges up 35%.
Good. Okay, for number 6, item number 6, committee updates. I'll have to say that I mentioned at our meeting on Saturday that I would be getting in touch with the different committee chairmen to find out exactly who was willing to stay chair and those for new positions. And I made a few calls, and what I'd like to present to the board is changes that on some of the committees. And after completion, I would like to get I'll make a motion to accept, and if you want to discuss or whatever, we'll have it available there. First, before I get to that, do any of you have any changes on committee members that you want to bring forth? Jim?
Because of an announcement you're about to make, I've had, one committee member on the architectural control committee, ask for a resignation. That's Matt Chansey, because he's likely be on another committee as a leader. Okay. So if there's anybody out there who's interested in committee positions, please, check with Brian or myself.
Now, let me just mention, this is mainly for the audience here and also for the ones that are zooming. We have different committees that can use committee members. If you're interested in getting on one of the committees, I'd suggest you look in the communique. It has all the committees that we have on, out here at Lake Kiowa. Phone numbers for the chairman, give them a call and discuss it with them, talk with them, and see if that's a committee that you would like to be on. That's one of the important things is a committee member can bring information to the committee, and then of course the committee brings it to the board for action. So I'm going to go through the list of those that I have talked to, and this would be setting up the committee's chair for this next year. I still have some that I need to talk to that I'll be getting to before the next meeting, and I'll have that available for everybody. First off, Architectural Control Committee, Jim Adams will continue to work in that. Bylaw Committee, Corky Calhoun. Election Committee, Kathy Gray. Facilities Committee, Clark Enright. I know you're writing them down. I've made copies for everybody. I'll give them to you. You'll have to write. Jamie was glad to get that. Facilities Committee, Clark Enright. Job Committee, Randy Romines. Information Systems Committee, Kathy Gray. Land Use Committee, Jim Fox. Lodging Tavern Committee, Jim Adams. Long Range Planning Committee, Nancy Jackson. Parks and Rec Committee, again, James Fox, Jim Fox. Rules Enforcement Committee, Matt Chansey. Matt, we appreciate you taking that committee. Safety and Security Committee, John Roach. Ways and Means Committee, Brent Reed will continue to remain chairman of Ways and Means. COVID-19 will be Kathy Gray, and hopefully this committee will not have to last a whole lot longer, but anyway, she's going to be continuing in that position. These are the changes in committee members. I also would like to present to the board for approval is the termination of ad hoc committees. We have some ad hoc committees that are no longer functioning as a committee. And the recycling committee, which was put in for Kathy, she was kind of the chairman of that, and it turned out we have a private contractor that's doing that, so that committee is not necessary. And the legal search committee, which John Roach headed up, we have now the new attorney for the board, so that committee could be terminated. What I'd like to do is now is make a motion to the board to accept these names for chairmanship for the various committees and also for the termination of the recycling and legal search committee. I have a motion. Do I have any second? Jim Adams second. All in favor of this group? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. The item number A on the committee updates, Safety and Security Committee, discuss and take possible action on the proposed buoy restriction rule change. We'll get back to that item. The Safety and Security was, I guess you could say, asked to look into this. We had a problem with people that were hooking up to the buoys, and they also had private buoys that were not in the right place and were, I guess you could say, causing congestion. They came to the Safety and Security Committee back a while back. This was put into the communique for residents to make comments on. I don't believe that we, as a committee, received any comments. The buoy restrictions would be watercraft may not tie or hold onto any buoy. Placement of privately placed buoys is not allowed without and the change was from Architectural Control Committee. It was changed without the approval of the committee to manager advance approval. I'd like to put before the board a motion to accept this change to the buoy restrictions. Do I have a second? John, have any discussion on this? All in favor of approving this motion, say aye. Opposed? No. Motion carries. So the next item, golf committee. Randy, do you have something for the golf committee?
Just a reminder that we're
Just a reminder that coming up at the spring kicker and the women's spring fling, that if the golf course is in good enough shape, according to Brian, it will be back onto the cart pass with our pre-COVID rules, back to the rules that have been set in place before COVID started. The 3 carts and doubling up, it's back to normal. That's basically, except for the tree stuff, and Jim's got that, but it has been approved by the golf committee. I'll run through when we start talking about it in a minute.
Okay, does the board need to take any action on this? No. Okay. Okay, next, item B, Architectural Control Committee, Jim Adams.
Like the buoy thing, there was a proposed rule that we do every 6 months. And we had a couple of changes to the architectural control handbook. One of those changes is related to detached and attached buildings. The second one was related to swim spas. They were published in the communique, as most of you know, and we did get some feedback from different members. So we tried to change, we took it back before the committee and reworded things slightly. So I've provided to you guys the actual wording out of the architectural control handbook with the changes that were proposed. And essentially, on the detached buildings, the proposal was, the new rule was originally proposed that to have a detached building that had habitable space, it would have to have a conditions, it would have to be connected to the main building with conditioned space. And so we got a question back, well, what's habitable? And that was a good point. And because we knew what we knew in our mind, but we didn't put it, it wasn't spelled out in the rules. So we went back and kind of read the rules, but we were more clear and said habitable space basically is if you have a toilet and or a shower bathtub. So that makes it habitable. And therefore, if it's habitable space and it's a separate building, then it has to become not separate, it has to become attached, it has to be attached by conditioned space. So that's the effective change there. The second one was related to swim spas. The intent of the committee was to try to control above ground pools a bit and not allow swim spas to become like too big and take over the whole backyard. We went out and researched swim spas, and you couldn't hardly find any over 25 feet. So we said that was the maximum, and none in Lake Kiowa were already that. But we did receive some feedback saying that may be a concern. So what we did is go back and basically change the definition of swim spas and hot tubs to be, it has to be a swim spas or a hot tub too must be completely self-contained unit, all the plumbing as well as the electrical control and components are built within this swim spot cabinet. So we're not defining size. There aren't any out there. There's only one in the market over 25 feet that I've found so far. So I don't think size is what it is. So that's essentially the new definition instead of I have put before you the rule changes that are in there. That are going to be, if you approve them, will be in the architectural control book. Do I need to read those, or can you just accept them as I presented?
I think we just accept it as you read it here and just need a motion on it.
Can we take, we'll take them, I guess, one at a time. If we, on the detached buildings, I would propose we accept the new architectural control handbook change related to detached buildings that include habitable space.
Do we have a second on the motion? Jerry C. All in, do we have any discussion? Anyone have any questions on it? Randy?
Discussion, I just want to know why.
Why?
Why the change?
Was the main reason, the why was to prevent having multiple houses and multiple habitable spaces on a single property. And if you can attach them in the same building, then there's no same building, so it's not like there's any control over it.
Any other questions, discussion? We have a motion, seconded, all in favor? Aye. Opposed?
And the second one was, I would propose the changes to the architectural control committee recommended related to swim spas and hot tubs, essentially making them self-contained units.
We have a motion, do I have a second? Randy? Any discussion? All in favor, aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Next list on the item on the list, the Parks and Recreation Committee, Jim Box.
So two items under Parks and Recreation. One is, as we talked about at previous meetings, we're in the process of exploring what it will take to upgrade the lighting at the tennis court. And Chris Wagner and I met about a week and a half ago with a very qualified contractor. It's called NEMA 3, and they are sports lighting contractors who do that work all over the place in the North Texas. And so he was able to walk around the site and kind of take a look at the tennis court and what we have. And he said he would go back and he will, he has relationships with all the manufacturers of light poles and light fixtures and everything. So he will get quotes for us from different manufacturers and come back with basically a proposal to kind of meet some of the standards that we outlined for what we'd like to see in the tennis court. We'll see where we stand when we get that information. I have not heard back from him, but I know he was hit pretty hard from the storm, so I think he was might take a little bit before he gets that information back. But I'll contact him again here soon if we don't hear back from him. So, any questions on the tennis court lighting?
Will we need any type of warranty on something like this?
You know, that's again, he's in the process right now of helping us identify costs from the manufacturers. Now, his services and what it would take in there, I guess somebody else could do that. So we probably do need to talk a little bit about the process for what it would take to award this. But at least we have a better idea right now of what standards are out there in terms of the manufacturers and the materials that we need to take with us. Okay. The second item, and LeaAnne, if you have the PowerPoint on I think you have in front of you probably a picture of the tree donation, but you go ahead and go to the graphic line. See what we're talking about here.
I need to get out.
So while she's queuing that up, just a little background. We have been talking about donation of trees for quite a while. We have 3 trees, 3 donations for trees from 2020. One is for the memory of D. Irwin, which that tree will go, this is previously approved, will go to near hole 6 by the forward tee. Then there's another tree that is related to Parks and Recreation, and that is in memory of Bill Brannon and the Kiowa Book Club, and has raised funds. We should have those funds here. And that tree will be in the vicinity of the pavilion. Then there was a third tree donation, which was for John Beck. And while we were looking at the John Beck tree and talking about doing a group of trees as opposed to one single tree, and this was discussed with the golf advisory group and the golf committee, we began looking and seeing the fact that there was an opportunity for some more trees kind of more or less in the ditch over there by the road, trying to help keep balls from going in the backyard or maybe even out of the road. At the time we were reviewing the plan, there was no funding, no donation for that. We were thinking maybe the POA might want to step up and fund those trees. There was no motion on that at the time. As of last Tuesday at the golf committee, RJ's group from MGA stepped up and said, we'll donate $1,000 for this. And then at the MGA board meeting on Wednesday, that was approved. So Crystal has the check. So we now have funding for those trees that previously we did not. The plans had all been reviewed, but the donation has never been accepted by the board. So that's why I want to make sure tonight we get that opportunity to say we'll accept that. But John Beck tree has been previously approved. So what we're approving is the MGA donation, if that's what the board wants to do.
Okay, you want to make a motion on that?
I'll make a motion that we accept the $1,000 donation from the Men's Golf Association for a group of trees on hole number 12.
Do I have a second? Jim Adams, second. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? The motion passed. Thank you, Jim. Next item on the list is Rules Enforcement Committee, Julian Yeager. Discuss and take possible action on proposed setback rule change. You got a microphone.
Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I think everyone has in front of you obstructions of road, roadway, I should say. Due to the fact we've had a lot of discussion on roads, and where the setback starts. Anything from the center of the street to the side of the street. I went ahead and I got a hold of Ronnie Young, the Lake Kiowa SUD, in other words, the water department. And I asked him, what is a good place to actually get a setback? And he said the best place to get a setback is from the water meter. Most everyone's water meter, 98%, and I have an email from him on that. 98% of all the water meters are on the outside of your property line and right next to your sideline. And there usually is, in most cases, he mentioned, a steel stake right beside it. And he said in some cases you may dig 3 inches, others you may have to dig a foot or more to find it. But there is a steel stake there. So our suggestion, and when I say our suggestion, the Rules Enforcement Committee made a decision that we ought to go ahead and just make it from the interior of the inside of the water meter. That's where the property line starts and come back to 30 feet. That way, no one has to go out on the street to do any kind of maintenance. You just make it from water meter, 30 feet, you have it. So that is the proposal.
Gordon.
Julian, I have a question. if your water meter is on one side of the lot and your driveway is on the other side of the lot, you're really talking about a line, aren't you, that goes from one water meter to the next water meter and then 30 feet up, not just the water meter, because your driveway could be 60 feet away, the way it's written, and you can park right on the ditch. It says minimum of 30 feet from the interior side of the water meter, but actually there's got to be a line somewhere that you're going to measure up 30 feet.
Correct. Our thought was during the meeting was the fact if you came up the side yard line, came up 30 feet from there.
And then do what? Run a parallel line across?
Well, we didn't get quite that far as far as the parallel line, but this is just what was proposed, and we're looking for information or feedback from everyone here to make a determination. What is the best way to have a property line that everyone can abide by?
It's pretty much like the old rule that said at your property line, and you're just defining the property line, is at the water meter. But in reality, your property line goes all the way across your property. So I think there has to be something added in this sentence saying that there's going to be a line from this water meter to this water meter, and then you're measuring your 30 feet up. Because this one would allow you to park your trailer way down by the driveway or the entranceway if you're simply saying 30 feet.
I understand what you're saying. In other words, make a straight line from one water meter to the next. And then
Yes,
be 30 feet back from that point.
yes,
Is that correct?
that's correct.
Jim?
Well, for just one point of clarification, and then, or maybe two, those are the points of clarification, is, for the architectural control committee, or in the handbook, there are setbacks from the property line also, and just for the record, this has nothing to do with building setbacks, this just has to do with trailer setbacks, just so I'm saying that for everybody's. The second point is, having worked with Rich, who probably worked with you guys, who put forward this rule, I understood the intent of the rule was to, and that's why I moved it from the property line to the street, and I understand the challenges there, but was for people, both he as a compliance officer and for property owners or members to be able to visually look at, instead of a property line that's invisible, to look at the street, and the assumption was that the property line's about 10 feet in from the street. But I think they've received feedback, and that's not always the case. The edge of the street is not always 10 feet from the property line, so it varies from one side of the street to the other. So but Corky makes a really good point on it. You just look at the water meter, that helps you in that particular spot, but it doesn't help you all the way across the yard.
Understand. I'll go ahead and get that changed as well. And just your other point as well. Yeah, Rich and I did work back and forth to ensure whatever rules were in rules enforcement, they matched also the architectural rules. We didn't want to get anywhere, any confusion whatsoever.
Well, for clarity, I mean, it's okay to change this rule however you want. I was just pointing out there's different setback rules. And the one related to trailers will be different than, we're not going to change the one on building because it legally should be from the property line and you have to get surveys and that kind of thing. So that one should stay. This one's related to trailers, and there's really more of an eye test. I understood it.
Correct. Any other questions? Any other comments? All right, thank you.
Yeah, what we'll do, with this proposal here is, I guess you could say we can table it for our next meeting and, come back with, maybe what you think as far as changing, make it a little bit clearer for the property owner and for the compliance guy.
Yes, I will. One other thing I wanted to ask the board, there are a number of changes to rules enforcement. And I just wanted to know, is it possible to at least maybe do a third of it over the next 3 months? The reason I say a third, there's a number of changes in the rules enforcement, and it would take up too much time to try to get it all done at one time. So I'm looking at maybe over the next 3 months to at least take a portion of it, and then maybe get that portion revised, do the second one, get it revised, so on and so forth. They'll probably go all the way to July timeframe, would be my guess.
Well, the only thing is, I think I sent to you I guess you say schedule or policy or procedures as to rule changes that indicates that how it will be sent to the committees. The committees in turn will review it, bring it to the board then will look. Then we put the communique, it was approved by the last board, these policies and procedures for changing rules, where the rules would only be changed twice a year. And the reason being was the expense of putting out, they got to where I think rules were being changed. And next month another change, and they were having to print them and publish them and give them to the court. So the last board came up with this policy or procedure, however you want to call it, that there would be certain dates that this would be done in March. It would be done, the proposal would be brought in March before the board to be implemented in July. And then I believe again, the other month was September to be brought before the board to be implemented in January. So I don't know, I don't know if you got that. I sent the email, was this to you?
Correct. I received both the draft and the undrafted copy.
Okay. Jim?
Julian, I'm on the architectural control, and we are going through a similar process, and we're just targeting next or September now, and we're going to review a section of architectural control handbook and what we can get done. If there's any proposed changes, we'll bring it to the board before September, and they can look at it, and we'll go through the publishing process of those that we want to move forward and that kind of thing. So I think it'd be fine if we continue through it, propose ideas as a committee. That's why you're there.
Exactly. Well, that's, rather than waiting till September, you don't want to spend several hours going through this. That's why I was suggesting at least to go through it now. In September, maybe approve it at that point in time.
No, I think what Sam was trying to say is that we receive changes twice a year, and if you go through them from now until September, you can build them all up, whatever you have, and then bring them in September, and they'll get approved for January implementation next year. That's just the rule we have in place.
No, I realize the rule. There are so many changes, suggested changes is what I'm saying. You probably end up spending 3 hours here minimum going through this in September. And I don't believe you really want to do that. That's why I'm kind of suggesting now is to at least look at it now, but don't implement it until sometime in September. We can have a final review at that time.
Is there any way that you could, y'all work on them? You get the rules ready, you make copies, bring them to the board members, we'll look at them, we can look at it at that time, I mean, there's information. I think we need to go by what the procedures are for doing it. They have to be put in the communique before the board is gonna act on them. So it's a lot more things other than just the board looking at it.
Okay, are you talking then, Sam, to give you the rules now or that in September?
I'm talking about, if in September you have that many rules that it's gonna take 3 hours to go through it, probably be better to have it furnished to the board before and let the individual board member go through it and look at it. And, that way you cut down your 3 hours.
I agree 100%. When would you like for me to send that out to all the board members?
Oh, you already got them all done?
You got them done?
They have been done, yes. I started back in September.
Yeah. I was thinking you could probably get with, Brian on it and, give them out to the board members and let us look at them.
If I'm not mistaken, I think everything goes to Brian first. And then he makes the copy and sends out to the board. Is that correct?
That's correct.
All right, that's what I'll do then.
Corky?
Sam, just a point of order. Every board makes rules, and unless they're dedicatory rules registered with the county, added to the governance, they expire with the new board that comes on. So if we have some rules that you want to keep from 2018, 2019, 2020, to make those official, we would have to bring those back to the board again because they've now expired according to the Robert's Rules of Order.
Okay, so what?
I'm just saying you referenced the rules that the board had established. Those rules have expired. If we want to renew them with this new board, we need to renew them. We can't continue to quote a rule that has expired. And unless they've been registered with the county with our governance, then they haven't been, then they've expired with this new board. We made rules back in 29, 10, 12, 2015, and every other board. But at the end of that board, those rules are no more. I don't think you have a book of rules that go back 20 years that boards have established because they expire.
So what you're saying is each board can do what they want to do.
As far as rules of operation, as far as the rules of how you're voting on things or how you're presenting your financial statement, or, I think it's a good idea that we not have more than 2 changes a year. I don't disagree with the rule. I'm just saying that the rule has disappeared with the end of 2019.
Jay?
Do you know, Courtney, do you know, because this rule that Sam references wasn't done last year. It was done on a prior board than I've been served on, so over a year ago. Do you know if it's not recorded with the county? Because, I'm perfectly good with the way you describe it, that if it gets recorded, then that's a forever rule. If it's not recorded, we just validate it each year. And we need to probably have a record of those rules that are not valid every year. And at this meeting, the first one for a new board, we should validate those rules.
I've gone through this with LeaAnne not long ago, if we have a book of resolutions and a book of rules, etc. And we do have a book of resolutions, that some of them are missing. And if you noticed in this bylaw proposal, we are adding the resolution 2019-1 to the bylaws so that it would be dedicatory and registered with the county to make it legal. If it has not, and if it has been, I would doubt it because she says there is no such book of those things at the POA office.
Well, I can go research it. I know that ACC handbook is recorded
It's dedicated.
at each time you modify it.
Correct.
I did see, because I happened to be researching county records, there was something about rules report. I couldn't tell you what date the last one was filed, but there was. So.
The rules are dedicatory and they're registered, as is the bylaws, the covenants. The thing that we talked about earlier about a code for what we do after 30 days, 90 days, 120 days, all that's required by the state. We have policies, those are all registered with the county. But a local rule that you all pass and raise your hand on, I doubt that those have a number and are registered. I would be very surprised because I was involved with this several years ago when we had the same effort with the president before that who had passed rules, and the new president basically said, since we didn't register those rules, then they don't exist with the next board. And as far as I can tell, by going down and looking at the registered documents, and we have probably 10 of them, that rule is not one of those. And John may have more information on that. This was a state law that was passed probably in 2012, that we had to go back and register all of our policies and write one on how to foreclose on a house, how to do this, how to do that. And we went through that process and did that.
Okay. I think the homeowners association, that's by the legislature, takes a lot of what we're talking about here. And I think Courtney's absolutely right. We need to have some kind of board governing rules that need to be made out there, registered. I agree with Courtney, if we're going to say something, we're going to do something because the rule requires this, and maybe ought to be a rule that requires that. And that's the point. And that's what you're trying to indicate.
Yes, I'm saying that when this first came out and we made the board governance and the code of conduct, the one that we just signed the other night, that had to be signed and registered with the county, then we could take a section of that and add rules if we wanted to, and do the same thing and add those. But these are not recorded rules, and they haven't been for many, many years. I mean, we made rules when I was a board member back in 2009 and before that, and they don't exist anymore.
Well, that was a question I was about to ask you. Your position is those rules don't exist. You use the term expired, and they're not in effect. Correct. So if we wanted to operate and govern this board, we would need to propose those rules and enact them for approval of this board and register.
Correct.
I think you're right, but I want to point out to the board that I'm not giving legal advice here. We have somebody who does give legal advice. I was just stating my own personal opinion, but not intending to advise the board.
Courtney, I have a question here. Look, where this is recorded, or the minutes of the meeting was in October 21st, 2019. And it says the Lake Kiowa rules and procedures and architectural control handbook revision procedure rationale, as the rationale was given. Do we know that this was not recorded in the county with this procedure that was adopted by the board at that time? That's one of the things I'd like to know is, after that meeting, was it taken and recorded to show that it was in the rules?
I would venture that it's not, but Brian can obviously look in to see if he has. All the dedicatory documents that you have in the office, reside in the office, you've got a book of those things. I don't recall, and I've been coming to board meetings since 2003. I don't recall that we ever made such a rule that we made at a board meeting, a registered meeting, and I've been involved with getting those things registered and with the county for, I would have to tell my age, since a long time.
So, of course, I totally agree with everything you're saying, and I'm all behind that. I guess what I'm saying is that I know the architectural handbook is filed at the county, and I'm asking, and maybe Sam's asking, is the rule book, we have, I guess, a book that has a list of rules, that if that's filed at the county, then it's in force. If it's not, then all we have to do is the next time it can be for an action, we can just say we want to have that rule here.
Well, I think you would probably want to add it to your governance, the one that we signed the other night. because we've got code of conduct and we've got governance. And that would be the place that we would add that kind of rule if we wanted to add that.
And does that mean the architectural control handbook?
No. If you probably, the last time you registered one, at least I have required, every time I did a bylaw or a covenant, I required a registered copy for my files.
Yes.
And stamped on the back when it was registered by the county. And your architecture control book is a dedicatory registered document.
And and you're saying the rules are not.
I'm saying I've never seen one and I've looked at them
That's fair.
7 years.
We just need to look at it.
Yeah, what we need to do, rather than have more discussion on it, I think the thing to do is to look and see if this has been recorded. If it has, then, we have a rule that we can go by. If it has not, then this board needs to take some type of action. If this is how we want it to work as far as procedure, then we should do it. So meanwhile, what I'd like to do as far as the setback rule, we will table this. And if you want to make the copies for the board, give them to Brian so that we have them, that we can review them.
Okay, one last thing that I do have, every year, kind of like the Courtney just mentioned, there's a charter for committees. And I'm not sure if everyone realizes that the charter is only good for that particular year. I have a charter that actually needs to be approved by the board. I have copies. Doesn't have to be approved right now, but the sooner we can get it done, then the Rules Enforcement Committee can start acting by it.
Well, you have the new chairman of the Rules Enforcement Committee right there. You can get with him and they'll make sure that it's what this chairman that you have coming in is looking at. Courtney?
I'm sorry to interrupt on procedures, but we have 7 standing committees in our bylaws that the bylaw sets what they're supposed to be done, and those are in effect charters. If you want to write an additional chart, something additional and pass it for that year, that would be fine. But those 7 committees, or 8 if you count tavern corporation, are already set in the bylaws. Now, all of the ad hoc committees are supposed to be, established by the president as to the job that they're supposed to be doing. And yeah, they're good for the period of that board, and that charter could last several years if it doesn't change. But it can affect their ad hoc committees, so the charter and what that committee does is set by the president, and he establishes the committee.
I will add that, I agree again, Courtney, but I'll add that this board is not obligated to any charter from any prior president or anything. Sam can bring those forth, or the committee members can bring it forth to Sam, and he can bring it to the table here, and each year, if any board member had a concern, they could bring it forth. We're not obligated to anything from a past board.
Except we are obligated to the 7 committees in the bylaws.
Yes, that's correct. If it's in the bylaw or those documents that were recorded, or anything in the bylaws we have to follow, except for we can propose bylaw changes that go before the membership.
Right.
Correct.
Anything else, Julie?
No, no, the committee, like I said, the committee approved the charter. I'll go ahead and give the new chairperson a copy of what we have. And I'll go ahead and forward it on to Brian as well.
Okay, going next, number 7, community manager.
Yes, thank you. Just as a reminder, Thursday, 9 o'clock, we'll start our new board member orientation here at the lodge. Probably take 3.5 to up to 4 hours as we go around the campus. We'll be having lunch with the attorney of record for the board as well. Chef Vincent will be on property working on the 21st, so that'll be on Saturday. The internal audit for the financials for the community has begun, It's in its early stages right now, as Crystal will be forwarding things to our accounting firm. Also, there's another drop down on audits. The ARF, CARF, and lake management reserves also require a audit. And this is done really internally. It's not as the big official audit that needs to be done and should be on the docket for this board to review, I would say, April or May. In the short time that I've been here, I have signed off on already in excess of $100,000 have gone out of these accounts for replaceable items. It's not a matter of malfeasance, ladies and gentlemen. It's a matter of good, prudent board checks and balances on this. As you see some large figures that were put in the treasurer's report, that, as Clark used to say, this is an audited number. And that needs to happen here in the next 60 days as that goes through into that process. So that's just a point of awareness. Let's see, last point. I just want to make a little clarification on our newly formed herb and tomato garden. And it's actually up, if you'd like to take a look at it tonight, it's outside the lodge here to the left. There are some donations that will help offset the cost on that from a couple of organizations, and those will be a timing issue for those to catch up with that line item because it kind of jumps out at you at $4,000. I want to say a special thanks to good to see that. A special thanks to the Garden Club for helping us with it. They were very instrumental in making suggestions on the type of soil and location and making those choices. Chris and his team put together the said, not really baskets, they're cages. And I think you'll find that this will end up being part of the tour with grandkids and other family members as they go through the community. Last note, on the healthcare issue that I brought up at our last month's meeting, we will now be in the, by next month, we'll be into a 120-day window in which we may consider, and I strongly recommend we do go to market with our healthcare program. So I want to make sure that our 3 new board members are up to speed on that, and we'll be having another Zoom meeting or possibly in-person meeting on that before your next board meeting. It's important that we get that next one ticked off to take a look at it because there appears to be quite a bit of movement in the healthcare insurance pricing for 21, and generally it's good news. It's not going up. Thank you.
Jim, you weren't asking for any action, so, but you mentioned something about the 4,000 jumping out at us, and nothing jumped out at me, so what did I miss?
It's under the lodge, as in this, I think the miscellaneous expense, or it's a lodge for equipment repair, so forth and so. I think it's 4113 or 4131.
So it's part of the plan.
But the line item as it sits for this month is 0 next to it.
Okay.
So the variance is all of it. So there will be funds to drain down on that, and I expect it to be about 3,000 of that.
And then that's the donations offsetting that? And
Yes.
to accept that donation next meeting or something?
Hopefully.
All right.
The women's organization is extremely generous, and they have excess funds, and they've already been tapped for a few others. And then the Friends of the Lodge, what? Friends of Lake Kiowa, I stand corrected, also shared considerable interest.
Okay, thank you, Brian. Number 8, additional business. Anyone have any additional business that they would like to bring forth before the board? Okay, number 9, comments from the members. Does anyone of our Barbara lot numbers?
Jim Adams, only detached buildings.
To give you your name and lot number.
Oh, Barbara Fox, 1492, 52. The detached buildings, the ones that do exist will be grandfathered, correct?
Yes, that's correct. That's the case for all new rules, I believe.
Okay. So So is that rule never written? Because when we moved here, they told us we could not have a detached house with a bathroom unless it's connected by a roof. But it's.
What changed was, it could be, you can only have one detached building, and then previously, you could have a detached habitable space, it had to be connected by a breezeway. What the change is now you're effectively changing it to be conditioned space and making it part of the house if it's habitable,
Okay.
to prevent two residences on one property.
So that's for the future.
If you already got one, you're in good shape.
All right, Randy Romans. Just, you were saying something about the golf carts going pre-COVID. So how many max golf carts on a hole?
It goes to, for a 5 swim it's 3, 4 swim it's 2.
Okay, so we're back to the regular old rules that we need to pair up and no longer drive ourselves.
Lake Kiowa rules, the
Okay,
center still good.
okay, and that's effective now?
Whenever Brian lets us go back to the, right into the 93 rule.
Oh, okay,
Or the field, I think he was looking at the grass and thought that it would work for the ladies' first big tournament and the guys' first tournament at the end of the month.
okay,
Now, don't quote me on that, he may come out and look at it and say, hey, it's gonna be the first week in April, but that's what he was looking at.
okay. The next thing might be the Brian Matt. I've been hearing from a lot of different people that poker's going to start up, but nobody can give me any definitive answers.
A couple of poker people are planning things starting the first week of April and are making reservations with Penny right now.
So that'll come out and communicate, so
Yeah.
we'll know.
Yes.
Thank you.
Anything else? Clark?
Okay, right, 54, glad you brought that up. Are we going to budget for the admin for the public group?
Would you say again?
We used to have, or we did have, a lady, and she's willing to do it again, do all the setup and breakdown, because it was a very large group on Wednesday night and Friday night for those poker days. The POA paid her. The question has come up a couple of months ago, is that money in the budget? The answer that came back to that was no. But it would not have been, being only a $600 amount for the year, it would not have been an item that the board would have focused on during the budgeting period. So I don't know whether it's there or not. And I don't know under what line item or chart, in our chart of accounts it would be in. Because during the budgeting period that we went through, we were still playing poker. So that's the question. Because it's a very large group and there are tables scattered out all over half of this. And there are poker supplies in that closet in the southwest room. And it's a big job.
I think what we have to do is put on the agenda for the next month. If that's what, we're wanting to do. I know, you know.
So we're not gonna start playing poker the first week of April.
Well, you can set up your table.
Okay,
Is this six?
I don't know that it's there or not, that's the point. I'm
Is it
making.
$600 annually?
It was.
I do not see a problem finding
Is
$600.
this the same one that, Charlie put out an advertisement to hire someone to,
Yes,
okay?
and Debbie Tier said she would come back.
I thought it was more than $600.
It's not,
Not the
it's
same?
not the same. There's more to this, and we should talk about it. I
Yeah,
mean, I
what,
agree, it's a good thing for poker, but it's not quite the same for that position that you talked about.
what we put on the agenda for next month?
We will.
And the poker people, what we talked about it offline the other night, poker, it's just like anybody else, they can come reserve the lodge and play in here just like any other club, and they can play poker. It's the funding for this person that you mentioned needs to come back before the board, make sure it's in the budget this year, or make sure the board wants to do that or whatever, because it was.
I understand the problem.
Yeah.
I don't need to be here the problem. I understand.
Okay.
I was voicing the problem.
Well, I was repeating it for people who are watching.
Okay.
Any other comments from the audience? Okay, we have one question that came up. I'll just go ahead and read it. It's from Betty LaMoth. And she wrote lot number 1536. She said, we need desperately a sign that slows the vehicles down on Comanche. It is dangerous on our street. I spoke to many neighbors outside yesterday, and they are all stated the enormous amount of speeding, especially around the area of 106 Comanche Drive. We need help. Neighbors said they have reported this. Now I am. Making a sign that shows people how fast they are traveling, it would shock them. Thank you. Only thing I can say, will, as far as the speed, we went through I give you a big effort of putting up speed signs. I halfway sometimes wonder if we wasted money, because I see a lot of people I consider to be speeding too. I think what the best way to handle this would be to, we'll hand this off to the Safety and Security Committee to come up with some type of recommendation to the board on how we may go about handling this. There have been suggestions of putting up stop signs, speed bumps, signs that tell people how fast they're going, and I'll be honest with you, I think the big thing we need is enforcement. And it's a case of having security, I believe, at the right place at the right time for catching people and probably slow them down. Not so much as the residents. I think a lot of problems we have is with contractors that are coming out in a hurry to get their job. So, in answer to her question, it will be submitted to Safety and Security, and we'll see what we can come up with to the board. Jim, you have a comment?
I guess signs aren't gonna actually slow anybody down, but enforcement might get some people's attention. So, I don't know how practical that is. Like I say, I have to be out there on a regular basis, but that's certainly be my recommendation. Try to enforce it.
Anyone else have a comment on this? Julie?
This is a former chairman for the Rules Enforcement Committee. Most of the tickets for speeding for people right here that live here, we had very few of the people that were actual contractors and subcontractors. I think probably Tracy might need to get her people out maybe before 7 o'clock and then start watching the contractors as they come in. And I know a lot of them are contractors, they're just not caught at the right time. But most of everything I ever saw for the last 18 months or so was always people here living here, unfortunately.
I know that one of the things we've had with security is been staffing. I know that the staffing has been down, and I think staffing is coming up. So we may, in that respect, see some change too, as far as enforcement. LeaAnne?
I know we talked about this earlier, but Comanche is essentially 3 sections. It's an uphill section, it's a long straightaway, and then it's a turn to another long straightaway. I firmly believe that if you put a stop sign at the top of the hill, which is near those people's house, it's actually right in front of my house. That's where the fastest, if you watch people, that's where they're going so fast, they become airborne in front of my house. And it happens all day long. Every day you can see their trailers come off the ground, their back wheels come off the ground. It just is, it's a really interesting, I guess it's because there's a hump in the ground right there, but I do firmly believe that a stop sign at least at that point would stop and would protect the children that are in that house, that they're afraid of getting hurt, because I've seen it over and over and over again in my front yard.
Okay, thank you. Next item is executive session. I'll make a motion to adjourn from my regular session to go into executive session. Do I have a motion for adjourning? Here. Second. John?